What do you know about God? Well, that might depend on the God or the supernatural being that you're referring to or aware of. In this video, we're going to talk about the God of the Bible, of the biblical church, and of the nation of Israel, and of his dealings with mankind. My name is Chris, and this is Foundation Bible Studies, where we help you connect with your Creator in Jesus Christ, help you establish a strong foundational relationship with Him so that you can fulfill the purpose you were created for. So let's dive in. Here in the Western world, especially in the United States, we tend to know a little about a lot. Now, when it comes to religion and spirituality, that can sometimes play for our good if we're willing to learn, but it can play for our bad if we're not willing to learn. And sometimes it works in the negative when it comes to thinking we understand people and what they believe. Every person, human or superhuman, is known by their name. And their name gives us a history on what they have said and have done in action. Now, if you're aware of any religion, or perhaps you grew up in a specific religion, you can think of whatever divine being, God, that you are aware of, or I can name some, try not to be offensive here, but we could think of Hera, Zeus, Apollo, Athena, Odin, Thor, Ra, Osiris, Isis. You get the idea. But what about Jehovah or Yahweh? What thoughts come to mind when you think of that name? Now, for some of us, perhaps certain groups come to mind, and this is not to point one group out over the other. This is to point out the divine being that most of us as Christians, to whatever degree, say that we trust in or believe in and are devoted to. Now, most often, Jehovah or Yahweh is referred to by tradition as the Lord, so as not to take his name and to use his name in vain. And so I'll use the Lord to refer to Yahweh or Jehovah for predominantly the rest of the video and any other videos that you might see. Now, the Lord is known by many names, which are usually compound names. The Bible was originally inspired in Hebrew, and so we find a lot of compound names for Jehovah, such as Jehovah Jireh, which is, or Yahweh Jireh, which is Hebrew for the Lord is a provider, he makes provision, or Jehovah Nisi, or Yahweh Nisi, which is the Lord is our banner, is our military banner. He's the one that goes before us. He's the one who we represent and who represents us. So as you read through the Bible, you find many descriptive names about actions that he has taken and that we have perceived, or that the biblical writers and experiencers perceive. Now, in getting to know the Lord, we first have to go to the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. For Christians, it is the first book of the Bible, which is Old Testament and New Testament, Old Covenant, New Covenant. And we find the Lord in the book of Genesis. And we find that he is the creator of all things, both natural and supernatural. In verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1, we also find the basic nature, if we're talking about the nature of beings such as flesh and blood, we also find the basic nature of the Lord, which is he is a spirit. It says that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters of the yet to be fully formed earth. As you continue on through the story in chapter 1 and into chapter 2, we find that God creates man on the sixth day of 7 successive or one after another days. And we find that he creates us in his image or his likeness, which means we are like him in character and in part of our nature, which is your spirit and my spirit, or the supernatural aspect of us. As the story goes on into chapter 2 of Genesis, we get a narrowed in view of mankind, or the creation of mankind, and God begins to give Adam some instructions on what to do and what he can do, and he gives him one prohibition on what he cannot do, which is he cannot eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says that the day that Adam does, he will surely die. As the story continues on, our Creator creates Eve from Adam, so that way mankind could come from one solitary unit, and he places them in the Garden of Eden. And then we get to chapter 3. Just hold on with me. We're going to see the character of our Creator, but it takes a little bit of a storytelling to get there. As we get into chapter 3 of Genesis, we find where the prohibition of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil comes into play. There comes a being into the garden who uses a serpent, and he begins to entice mankind, specifically Eve, into doing the very thing our Creator told them, specifically Adam, not to do, which he obviously told Eve. And it's in their rebelling and not listening to our Creator where we get to really see the character of our Creator, and talking about getting to know God, the God of the Bible, or the God of the biblical church and of the nation of Israel. Eve gives in to the enticement from the serpent, which was utilized by Lucifer, who we later know to be Satan or the devil. And as she gives in to the enticement, Adam gives in to his wife's encouragement, so to say, to also eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it is when both of them have eaten from the fruit that our Creator steps in to see what has happened. Now, in reality, our Creator really knew what was going on, but he needed mankind to be able to exercise their free choice or free will to see if they would follow his instruction or would disobey his instruction. Each one had its outcome. Each one had its consequence. Consequence could be good or bad. If I choose to do good, hopefully the consequence is good. If I choose to do bad, usually the consequence is bad. As our Creator asked Adam and Eve for accountability purposes what they did, they both began to push off the responsibility to the next person. Eve eventually pushes it off to the enticement by the serpent, which was utilized by Satan or Lucifer. And God begins to tell them the consequences of their actions. Now, before they ate the fruit, Adam and Eve were naked, but because their minds and their nature were pure, they were not aware that being naked was a shameful thing. And really, it wasn't supposed to ever be a shameful thing. But once Adam and Eve rebel against our Creator's instruction, it introduces a nature of rebellion and error into the DNA of mankind, into our human nature. And it is in this fallen state, as we call it, or this degraded state, that Adam and Eve begin to see that they are separated. Something has happened in their relationship with and to our Creator. And they now see that they are in a shameful position, such as when a kid does something they know they are not supposed to do and they get found out. Now it's here where we get to see the character of our Creator, and that he told Adam in the day that he ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that he would surely die. Now obviously, as you read the story, Adam and Eve didn't drop dead to the ground in that moment, but they did begin the dying process just as much as a piece of fruit that is plucked from a tree no longer has the nourishment of that tree. And the nature of rebellion and error was passed down to each successive generation just as much as a mother that is hooked on drugs passes down that drug dependency down to her offspring. And as our Creator steps in after he's told them the consequences, and he sees and knows that they are in a shameful state, he does something that shows some gracious or favorable character. Instead of him striking them down, as most people would assume that he would do based off of what he said, he actually slays an animal and uses the animal's skin to create what is in Hebrew coats or tunics or robes of skin to cover their nakedness. Now what this shows is that where our Creator, as we find out later as you continue to read the Bible, is that our Creator is pure and upright, and anything pure or impure, I should say, in contrast to his nature, is burned up in his presence like a piece of paper to a fire. But our Creator steps in and slays something else in Adam and Eve's stead in order that his justice could be met, but maintain as much as possible the relationship for the state that Adam and Eve are in. As you continue to read through Genesis, you see with the next generation of mankind, Cain and Abel, that sin or error, or what the Bible calls sin, but error and rebellion continues to degrade mankind. Cain kills his brother Eve over jealousy, and mankind just degrades and degrades and degrades from that point on. As we continue to read through Genesis and we get to about chapter 11, chapter 12, we find a man named Abram who our Creator reaches out to for partnership, or what the Bible calls covenant. And the Lord tells Abram that he will make of him a great nation because Abram's wife, Sarah, was barren. She couldn't bear children. And as time goes on, Abram makes many mistakes, such as lying that his wife is his sister. The Lord tells Abram to leave the area that he is in, to leave his family behind. He eventually takes his nephew Lot with him, which causes problems. And in spite of all the mistakes that Abram made, the Lord stays faithful to the partnership. Eventually, the Lord does bless Abram and Sarah, or later Abraham and Sarah, with a child named Isaac. And generations later, Isaac becomes one of a multitude of offspring, of course, generations involved with that. And they eventually become known as the children or the nation of Israel, which ties directly into the nation of Israel that is in existence today. And it is this nation of Israel that is eventually enslaved by the nation of Egypt. And the Lord steps in to free that nation of Israel and that generation from slavery. And even with the Egyptians who had enslaved them, he sought to be merciful and compassionate. But the leader of Egypt, the Pharaoh, continued to refuse the Lord's request to release the nation of Israel from slavery. The Lord uses a man named Moses as his messenger to Pharaoh, and uses Moses to lead the nation of Israel out of slavery, and gets him to a place called Mount Sinai, where the Lord can, in a supernatural, tangible way, reveal himself to the close to 2 million, if not more, people and offspring of Abraham, called the nation of Israel. But it is the man Moses that I want to zero in for this particular video. As the man Moses gets to interact with the Lord more and more, he observes all that the Lord is. He knows the language that the Lord is talking, which is his native language, Hebrew. And he knows all the context, all the nuances of the language. He asked the Lord, "Let me know you better." My paraphrase. He asked the Lord, "Show me your glory," or "Show me your presence, the fullness of your presence." The Lord, however, tells him, "No man can see my face or can see my presence and live." That goes back to God's presence being so pure and us being impure in our human nature, that his pure nature would burn us up like fire does the paper. What he does tell Moses is, "I will hide you in the side of a mountain, and you will be able to see the trailing end of my presence." And it's during this encounter that we get to find out the character, the basic character of our Creator. And as the Lord passes by, this is what he tells Moses. We find this in Exodus chapter 34, verses 5 through 6. And it reads like this. "Now the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there," talking about Moses, "and proclaimed the name of the Lord. And the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abounding in goodness and truth." So the Lord describes himself as merciful, gracious, long-suffering, abundant in goodness and truth. And it is these descriptions that we want to look into, as our English language does not always give us the best insight into the original inspired language, which is Hebrew. So when God is describing himself as merciful, he's describing himself as being sympathetic and compassionate, and to the point to where in right relationship he will do and will always do all that he can to protect us from harm. When God is describing himself as being gracious, he's describing himself as being pleasantly kind, benevolent, which is somebody who is disposed to doing good, and courteous. The word for long-suffering actually is a descriptive word of the body, and it's talking about the nose. And it's talking about when somebody gets angry. Of course, we know that our nostrils flare, our face gets red, and the Lord is using a human word or human description in order to describe his actions. And he's saying he is slow to get mad. He is slow to get to the point to where his nostrils are flaring in anger and his face is beet red because he is that upset. Unfortunately, I am not always like that. But as the Lord goes on to describe himself, he describes himself as abundant in goodness. And this ties back into that gracious point of being sympathetic in nature, meaning he understands where you're at and he's going to do what he can to step in and help you if you allow him to. And then truth. When it talks about God and being true or truth, it's talking about that which is firm, that which is fact. So God will always act on facts of the situation. He always takes in the whole of a situation and he takes a situation based on facts. And when our situation and the facts of our situation are overwhelming, he's going to step in and sidestep those facts many times in order to help us out when we are going to partner with him in relationship and partnership. Now, in my experience with our Creator in Jesus Christ and these characteristics is that these are always abundant, even if I don't emotionally feel like he is acting on my behalf. Like Abram, later named Abraham, I have made many mistakes after 11 years of living for Jesus and living in relationship with and to Jesus. I've made many mistakes, but thankfully, because of mature Christians around me, great pastors, they have exhibited these things even when I didn't deserve them. Now, many times when we just are stuck on tradition, or we are just spiritually, supernaturally immature, or it's just a rough spot in our lives that we still have to mature, a lot of times we find it hard to exhibit these qualities. But Jesus Christ is never in the place where he cannot exhibit these qualities, because this is who he is, and this is where we get these same characteristics from. Some people are more patient than others. Some people find it easier to do good unto those who are in need than others. And he is the completeness of all these qualities together. So my question to you is, what do you think of a being who has these qualities? Do you know anybody who displays these qualities in your life? Perhaps somebody who is a Christian, or somebody who doesn't outwardly confess to be a Christian, but they have some type of Christian background. Or perhaps you've seen people that say they're Christians and don't exhibit these qualities at all. Leave your comments down below and I'll share my thoughts with you as well. So our Creator in Jesus Christ is calling you into partnership, and he's asking you, would you like to get to know him with these same characteristics, and would you like him to help you develop these characteristics within you? If you've got something out of this video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so when we post new videos, you know exactly when they post. Until the next one, may the Lord keep you, protect you, bless you, and give you peace in these chaotic times. In Jesus' name.